Now, 4 ports of entry have been cut off by severe flooding, forcing the suspension of operations. This will affect cross-border movement into South Africa. Rain has also caused massive destruction in several provinces, with emergency teams placed on high alert. The Border Management Authority's Deputy Assistant Commissioner, as Peter Mphilo, joins us live now. Mr. Mphilo, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it here. Just to get clarity, so it is ultimately 5 at present. Why don't you just highlight those for us exactly, and when we can perhaps anticipate to have operations back, if at all, on those ports?
Yeah, good afternoon to you and the viewers. It is indeed correct that 4 ports in the northern region affected by the heavy rains, which resulted in us suspending port operations. And those ports are Bray, Pontdrift, Stockpoort, and Groblersbridge. As it is now at Stockpoort, the port is surrounded by the water. The corridor to the port, around the port, and also after the port is flooded. You could not even drive into where the port is, which is just unfortunate situation due to the act of nature. We had to unfortunately evacuate, our officials, including the support staff and SAPs from the port itself, due to the flooding around the port. And you remember that 1.5 months we were with you regarding the closing temporary suspension of operations at Groblersbridge on the same reasons, and it unfortunately happened again. Regarding the time required to resume with port operations, we cannot necessarily tell. There are a lot of contributing factors that at this stage we're still studying. We will then communicate. However, in an instance where it stops raining, perhaps it's good to put things into context. Till now, we're on the receiving end. The rain patterns that we're experiencing as a country and as a region, and unfortunately has put us where we are now. So we are studying the rain patterns to formulate an opinion as to when would it stop raining. Secondly, we also, in consultation with those that own, dam infrastructure, because when dams are full, when they open them, the water flows, into Limpopo River and subsequently flow into our personal space. So there are those factors that, as I'm speaking to you now here, I will not be certain as to when would the port operations resume. But should it not rain, it will also depend on the damage of the port infrastructure, and that will have to be a subject of investigation. It's only after the assessment that we can then be able to tell that in port X we can open in a day, port B in 3 days, port 4 in 4 days. So as it is now, we would unfortunately not in the position to tell, but we are of the view that should it stop raining in a day to maximum of 5 days, would be able to have prepared repairs what could have been, the damage, and resume with the port's operations.
Would you just confirm for us as well? Again, these are primarily entry points into Botswana, other than if I'm correct, and other than I think it's Groblersbridge. Where else exactly can people be crossing the border ultimately, particularly between Botswana and South Africa?
Yeah, you are correct. All 4 ports are bordering South Africa and Botswana. They differ in sizes. Some of them are non-designated ports, while some are designated ports. As it is now, we are advising the port users to use other alternative ports that are closer to the port, depending on where the traveler would be coming from. But on the side of Groblersbridge and Stockport, travelers are advised to make use of a bed bridge. That will also include Pontdrift users as well. If they want to cross to Botswana, they are in the better and position to make use of a bed bridge. With regards to Bray, which is on the side of Northwest, travelers are advised to make use of Ramatlabama, Koopfontein, and Skelpad. Those are ports that are closer to the mentioned port. To those that may even wish to go up, they are also more than welcome to use those ports, as I've mentioned. It is just an unfortunate incident as a result of act of nature. As BMA, we will not want to inconvenience travelers and the traders. We are just responding to this for safety reasons, safety of our employees and that of port users.
Does the Border Management Authority have the finances or the budget to fix any ailments or issues or broken infrastructure that may occur from all of this? Is that going to be something that you would have to look after, or does that go by the way of government, and which government authority would that be?
Yeah, as BMA, in line with the BMA Act, we were mandated to take over the port infrastructure from Department of Public Works. We're in the process of having that state asset, transferred and registered under the name of our entity. Whether the transfer is concluded or not, I think as government, as a collective, we should be able to have funds to repair the damages that they might have been caused, by the flooding. It happened also when the infrastructure was fully managed by Department of Public Works. When there are such damages, of course, they made funds available to ensure that the damages are repaired, which would enable us to resume with port operations. So we'll be in the position to fund, whether through us or Department of Public Works, the funding of repairing the damages should not be an issue.
And you said then the investigation into just the amount of damage and the amount of infrastructure that needs to be fixed would only then happen once you, of course, have the situation where the flooding isn't occurring and the water has perhaps subsided. Is that correct? Would that mean that the ports remain closed until that entire assessment and investigation has been done?
Yeah, I should say our officials are at the ports, except at Stockpoort, where we've evacuated them. They are evaluating as they are continuing monitoring the situation. There are other ports that may not have been negatively affected damage-wise, which will immediately open, but that should be after the assessment, of course. To other ports like your Groblersbridge, we have port infrastructure, electrical infrastructure, and other systems that we're using, including the integrity of the bridges of both Stockpoort and Groblersbridge. You will not want to expose, the travelers, including traders, to drive into the port space that is not assessed by various, professionals and certified them safe. This will also happen to the bridges, as you are aware that as you pass the operational space, immigration space, you will have to drive over the bridge, and both bridges, as I'm saying, they're affected by this heavy rain. So we work with Sanral, who would have to come and assess the port infrastructure and satisfy, the infrastructure as safe to be used by the port users. So it is on that reason that I'm saying any other damages as a result of that assessment, we should be able to fund it as government. It could be how long would it take, as opposed to whether we're funds or not. What we may have to say that it may require more funding could be perhaps the relocation of ports to areas where they may not be that vulnerable to flooding as it is now. So that may want another debate that may require additional funding, which would not have at this stage.
Deputy Assistant Commissioner, what about future-proofing our ports? Is that a conversation you may have at a later stage?
Yes, we are definitely engaging on that. I should say, perhaps to put things into context, most of our land ports are situated just along the river bank, and it makes them to be vulnerable during the flooding. You should be aware that the impact of climate change, as we're experiencing heavy rains, everything weather-wise is to an extreme. So when it rains heavily, our port, becomes a fertile ground for flooding. So what has to happen is to look at the possibility of relocating our ports into a higher ground to minimize the impact of flooding, and that would require a thorough assessment, budgeting, including the collaboration with our neighboring countries. To remember that if we are to relocate the funds, relocate the port, it will not only be our decision. We need to engage our counterparts in Botswana, because that will also impact where their ports are located. So it's not a decision that as a country we can then take and implement without the buy-in of our counterpart in Botswana. But that discussion is ongoing, and we're hoping that once it is done, we will have adequate funding, and we will also get the blessings from our counterpart in Botswana for them to agree for us to relocate the ports that are in a very compromised positions.
Yeah, it's going to be about the future of these ports as well then. That's going to be immensely significant to ensure that something like this can either be prevented, slowed down, eked away, and the pressure points on these borders isn't as difficult as well then. Deputy Assistant Commissioner, thank you so much for the time. The pressure on yourselves and the border officials, one imagines, can probably be a lot higher at this stage, so appreciate it. Border Management Authority Deputy Assistant Commissioner Mphilo.